Well, for another suspect, there's Mr. Clumpman, said Kai, but was unfortunately interrupted by the aforementioned Mr. Clumpman himself, who had only heard the last words he said. Yes, that's me, said the man with the long grey hair, and looked over to us. Lucky for us, he'd only heard his name and assumed that we'd been trying to start a conversation with him. How do you kids know who I am? He asked in a friendly tone. We walked up to him until we all stood in front of the shattered store window. The inside of the store looked a wasteland. The window pane had been completely shattered, shards laying in between the coffee pots near the window. The intruder had knocked over many of the pots, even ones that had been placed on various shelves along the walls of the store, though the shards and knocked over pots didn't even measure the extent of the chaos. Truly, there was a cannon stove right next to the door. It had been knocked over as well. It had to have been filled to the brim, because the entire store had been dusted in a fine layer of brownish red ash. Oh man, said Louise empathetically, that's a lot to clean up. Yes, it is, said the man and nodded. He picked up 2 pots from the store entrance, and they immediately colored his hands with ash. He decided to let it be, instead randomly putting the pots onto a free shelf, and turned back to us without even trying to clean his hands. Why are you collecting all those pots anyway? Louisa continued asking. I haven't seen a single price tag, so I guess you're not even trying to sell them. The man shook his head. No, I don't want to sell them. All I sell are postcards with the pictures of the pretty pot. He pointed at one of the postcard stands. It was nearly fully covered in ash and stood a little askew, as if the intruder had tried to use it to support himself standing up. Have you already tried to clean up the store? Kai asked into the middle of his explanation. No, I haven't touched anything yet. You might say that I'm still in shock. As I said, the only thing I sell are those postcards. You can pick one if you want. Wait, let me do it, Kai jibbed in, before Louise and I could even try to say anything. He stood in front of the postcard shelf for a long time, before he made the oddest choice. He picked a card that was covered in the thickest layer of ash, and carried it in perfectly vertical position, like it was a server carrying a plate. In a sudden turn of events, he announced, Wait here, I'll be back soon, and walked back into the direction of the parsonage. Neither of us had any idea what Kai was doing. Mr. Clumpman, on the other hand, nodded in apparent understanding. Probably wants to clean up the card. You know, he picked out a card that had the only missing pot for a motive. The only pot that has been stolen, right? The only pot that was possibly stolen, he corrected me lightly. It's too early to draw any conclusion yet. All I know is that the pot isn't here anymore. It had been my most valuable piece, and it was the only teapot in a sea of coffee pots. Wait, there's a difference between tea and coffee pots? Louise and I asked. Of course there's. They have completely different spouts. A connoisseur could tell them apart with a single glance. Anyway, I once bought a teapot at an auction. Someone there wanted it just as much as I did, until the price went up to 230 euros. What's so special about that one pot, I wanted to know. It's the illustration on top that makes it so special, explained Mr. Clumpman, and suddenly grinned. It's an hand-painted elephant, quite funny-looking. You have to admit, it's quite the extraordinary motive for a porcelain pot. Louise and I couldn't help but agree. Well, that's the one pot that went missing. The store window has been completely demolished, and its reparation is going to be expensive. I'm lucky none of the other pots were even damaged. Still, it's an horrible act of vandalism. I never thought I'd see something like this happen in our quiet mountain village. He wiped a few droplets of sweat from his forehead. God, the weather's hot today, isn't it? The snow's melting at record speeds. I'm telling you, the Michel is going to overflow the shores again. There was a year it literally went up all the way to this place, though ever since they built that dam, that's significantly more unlikely. The only place that's actually in danger of being flooded is the large playground. But they already put all those warning signs there. At least that's what Mr. Strafmar said. He gave us a gentle warning. And why have you been collecting all those pots in the first place? I asked again. By now I'd realized that Mr. Clumpman had a fondness of chatting away and rapidly switching topic from one moment to another. Oh, you know, he started his next explanation. It was years ago when I inherited something from a distant relative. I was quite disappointed at first. It was just an old flat filled with clutter and worn-out furniture, and a showcase full of coffee pots. Not a single scrap of money. At first I wanted to just throw it all away, but I felt some pity for the coffee pots and took them home with me. Then, over time, I went to a lot of flea markets and saw a lot of sad-looking coffee pots that didn't interest anybody but me. And I started buying them. Soon I employed an array of pensioners to go on flea markets, buy coffee pots for €2, just so they could resell them to me for 3. That's the story of how I collected thousands of coffee pots over the years. You know how Michel used to be a hotspot for porcelain production, right? And even nowadays there's still a porcelain market every year with a highlight of our porcelain princess making an appearance. The next porcelain market celebrates its 20th anniversary, and I thought about setting up all my cans on the marketplace. The porcelain princess, I'm quite sure she has a daughter your age, could stand in the middle and it would make a really pretty picture. Is the princess pretty? Asked Louise. She might be. They're electing one every couple of years during the porcelain market. You'd be a little young though, since the candidate has to be at least 18 years old. Suddenly, Kai returned. I couldn't believe my eyes, holding 2 different coffee pots. At first I was puzzled as to where in the world he'd managed to retrieve 2 coffee pots, until I remembered the box in our hallways that my dad and Janine used to store all sorts of clutter that they didn't need or plan to use as game prizes. Here, Mr. Clumpman, Kai said, with an unusual layer of friendliness in his tone. He was planning something. The policeman said that someone stole one of your pots. You could pick one of these 2 pots as a replacement. Here, take a look.